Kate walked into my life like a storm, a whirlwind of charm and ambition, her emerald green eyes hiding ambitions as vast as the ocean. When I proposed, my father intervened, insisting on a prenuptial agreement. He made it clear, "Alex, protect what you've built." Kate signed it with a graceful smile, dismissing the legalities as unnecessary formalities. "I love you, not your bank account," she said, her voice silken with sincerity. The early years of our marriage were idyllic. As an architect, I had designed the mansion of my dreams, a sprawling estate with floor-to-ceiling glass windows, an infinity pool, and marble floors imported from Italy. Kate relished the luxuries: weekly spa appointments, dazzling jewelry, high-end cars, and her favorite, a membership at an elite country club. She thrived in this life, throwing extravagant parties that cemented our position as a power couple. But the gloss began to fade within the first year. It started subtly. Kate's phone, once carelessly left around the house, now accompanied her everywhere. Texts arrived at odd hours, accompanied by her cryptic smiles. One evening, as I was finalizing a design proposal, I glanced up to find her whispering into her phone on the balcony, her silhouette illuminated by the city lights. "Just a friend," she said when I asked. Her explanation felt paper-thin. Our evenings, once filled with laughter, grew quieter. I buried myself in work, but I couldn't ignore the tension. Then came the credit card bills. Kate had always been a big spender, but the charges were escalating: luxury boutiques in cities I hadn't known she visited, exclusive restaurants far from home. One bill caught my eye: a weekend stay at a 5-star resort I'd never heard of. When I confronted her, she brushed it off with a laugh, saying it was a surprise she had planned for us but canceled. Suspicion gnawed at me, but it was my father who delivered the first real blow. "Alex," he began one evening over whiskey, "you need to check on your wife." He handed me an envelope, photos of Kate in intimate moments with a man I didn't recognize. The man was younger, athletic, with the kind of smirk that screamed confidence. My chest tightened as I studied the pictures, taken at a private club only she frequented. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I hired a private investigator to uncover the truth. What he found left me reeling: a series of secret meetings, lavish gifts exchanged, and even whispers of a private bank account in her name. It wasn't just infidelity, it was deception on a scale I hadn't imagined. One evening, pretending to work late, I returned home unannounced. The house was dark, save for a soft glow from the living room. I stepped inside, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet, and froze. Kate sat on the couch, her laughter light and flirtatious as she poured wine for a man whose hand rested comfortably on her knee. My presence startled them both, and the scene exploded into chaos. She screamed, he stumbled, and I stood there, numb, as the image of my wife's betrayal burned into my mind. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Kate tried to explain, her voice a mix of pleading and defiance. "It was nothing serious, Alex. You've been so distant, I needed someone to talk to." But her crocodile tears couldn't mask the truth. My father, ever pragmatic, urged me to file for divorce. She signed the prenup. "You'll be fine," he assured me. But then, a twist. Kate's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was financial. She had forged my signature on a business document, diverting funds into her secret account. The amount was staggering, enough to destabilize my company. She was living a double life, one foot in our marriage, the other in an elaborate scheme with her lover. The revelation came during a heated argument. "You think this life is yours?" Kate spat, her composed facade cracking. "You wouldn't have this house, these cars, this success without me." She claimed she was entitled to more than the prenup allowed, threatening to drag my name through the mud if I didn't comply. But I had one card left to play. The private investigator had uncovered not just her infidelity but a web of deceit involving her lover, a con artist with a criminal record. Armed with this information, I presented her with a choice: leave quietly or face public humiliation and legal repercussions. In the end, Kate chose the former, though not without a final act of defiance. The morning she left, I found our wedding photo shattered on the floor, her ring abandoned in its frame. The house, once vibrant with her energy, felt hollow. I returned to my work, pouring my pain into my designs, each blueprint a reflection of the chaos and clarity she had brought to my life. The scars she left were deep, but they became the foundation for a stronger, more resolute version of me. Kate's betrayal wasn't just an end, it was a brutal, necessary reckoning. Kate's departure should have been the end of it. She walked away with her pride bruised and her lover trailing behind her, leaving me with the shards of a marriage built on lies. But the story didn't end there, it just shifted. The months following her exit were a strange mix of relief and bitterness. I focused on rebuilding my life, my company, and myself. Kate, on the other hand, dove deeper into the spiral that had consumed her. I didn't intend to keep tabs on her, but whispers traveled in our social circles. Her name came up at events, her exploits embellished with every retelling. The glamorous life she had reveled in with me was fading. But one particular story cut through the noise and lodged itself in my mind, a twisted footnote to our failed marriage. It began innocuously, as many disasters do. After the fallout, Kate seemed determined to preserve the illusion of her high-status life. When her car, a sleek luxury sedan I had gifted her, began to show signs of wear, she decided it was time for an upgrade. She visited a dealership known for catering to the ultra-wealthy, the kind of place where customers are pampered with champagne as they browse six-figure vehicles. This was where she met Marcus. I'd never met the man, but from what I later pieced together, he was smooth, a financial consultant with a polished charm and a knack for reading people. He worked with high-net-worth clients, using his silver tongue to part them from their money in ways that seemed both effortless and inevitable. Kate, it turned out, was his ideal mark. Their first meeting, I was told, was nothing remarkable. Kate arrived at the dealership, dressed in designer clothes she could no longer afford, with the kind of confidence she had mastered during our marriage. Marcus, always hunting for opportunities, approached her under the guise of assisting with her purchase. What began as small talk about horsepower and handling quickly veered into more personal territory. Kate, influenced by her friends' tales of thrilling affairs and fueled by a growing dissatisfaction with her reality, was captivated. Marcus listened intently, complimented her in ways that felt fresh compared to my routine indifference in those final months of our marriage, and subtly hinted at the lifestyle he could provide. She left the dealership that day without a car but with his business card tucked into her purse. Their relationship escalated quickly. Marcus played his role with precision, feeding Kate's fantasies of passion and escape. For her, he was a way to reclaim the excitement she felt was missing. For him, she was an easy target, lonely, desperate to prove she still mattered, and willing to pay for the privilege of being desired. It wasn't long before Kate was spending exorbitantly on their rendezvous. Expensive hotel suites, lavish dinners, even gifts for Marcus, all charged to her dwindling accounts. What shocked me most wasn't the betrayal itself. I had come to expect as much from her, but the sheer brazenness of it. She wasn't just having an affair, she was funding it. The irony was brutal. While I had spent years building a life she claimed to despise, she was now subsidizing a fantasy that Marcus sold her. My private investigator, the same one who had uncovered her first indiscretions, was the one who pieced together the details. It started with a simple question: do you want to know what she's up to? I shouldn't have cared, but I couldn't help myself. The reports he provided were both infuriating and, in some twisted way, vindicating. Kate's outings with Marcus were meticulously documented. Photos, receipts, and even audio recordings of their conversations. She gushed about how he made her feel alive, how he understood her in ways I never could. And Marcus? He played his part perfectly, showering her with empty promises and calculated affection. The breaking point came when Kate, strapped for cash, began dipping into her secret account. The same account she had siphoned money into during our marriage. I was informed that Marcus, ever the opportunist, had started asking her forged loans to support his business ventures. Kate, either blinded by her infatuation or unwilling to confront the reality of her choices, obliged. The fallout was inevitable. Marcus, having drained her of what little financial security she had left, began to pull away. Kate, desperate to hold on to the illusion, clung to him, offering more, giving more. But Marcus wasn't interested in loyalty, He was interested in leverage. When she finally confronted him about his dwindling attention, he made it clear their arrangement had always been transactional. I wish I could say I felt satisfaction in her downfall, but the truth is more complicated. Learning about her affair with Marcus wasn't just a confirmation of her character, it was a reflection of the chasm that had grown between us long before he entered the picture. Kate had always craved something I couldn't provide: validation, excitement, the thrill of the chase. And Marcus? He was simply the catalyst. As I stood in my office, staring at the final report from the investigator, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness. Not for Kate, but for the life we could have built if only she had been honest with me and, more importantly, with herself. In the end, Marcus disappeared as quickly as he had arrived, leaving Kate to pick up the pieces of her shattered facade. The luxury cars, the country club memberships, the glittering social events, they were gone. And so was the woman I had once loved, replaced by someone I barely recognized. As for me, I moved forward. The wounds Kate left were deep, but they were also a reminder of the importance of integrity, both in others and in myself. Kate's story, I realized, was a cautionary tale, one that underscored the dangers of living for appearances rather than substance. And Marcus? He was just another chapter in the book of her life. A chapter she would likely never read, but one I would never forget. The day I found out about Kate's affair will forever be etched in my mind. Not because of the betrayal itself. No, that was a storm I had already weathered before. It was the way it unfolded, with stark clarity, leaving no room for doubt. I had suspected something for weeks, maybe months. Kate's behavior had grown erratic, late-night outings she chalked up to meeting friends, unusual charges on her cards, and her phone, always on silent, always clutched tightly. My friends noticed it too. "Something's off, Mark," my oldest friend said one evening over drinks. "You should look into it." I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the signs. Hiring a private investigator felt like déjà vu, dredging up memories of the last time I'd done it. This time, I wanted something irrefutable. "I don't want rumors," I told him. "I need facts, solid, indisputable facts." He nodded, his expression professional but empathetic. "We'll find out what's going on," he assured me. It didn't take long. Within a week, the investigator had uncovered the truth. Kate wasn't just seeing Marcus. Their encounters were recorded on security cameras in hotels, parking garages, even at the dealership where they had first met. The footage was damning, showing them locked in embraces, entering and leaving places together, her hand casually slipping into his. The real blow came when my investigator collaborated with Mark and a couple of other close friends to obtain more evidence. One of them worked in security and had access to footage from a high-end hotel where Kate and Marcus often met. The recordings were crystal clear, Kate laughing, her hand brushing Marcus's arm, and later, both disappearing into a suite. Mark was the one who handed me the USB drive containing the recordings. "Are you sure you want to see this?" he asked, his voice low. I hesitated, but my resolve hardened. "I need to," I said. Watching those videos was like peeling off a bandage to examine a wound you knew was infected. The scenes played out with brutal finality, each one confirming what I had dreaded. Kate's face, once so familiar and dear, now seemed like that of a stranger. The intimacy she shared with Marcus wasn't just physical, it was laced with laughter, stolen glances, and an ease that cut deeper than I expected. Confronting Kate wasn't an option, not yet. I needed to ensure I had my legal and financial bases covered. The prenuptial agreement my father had insisted on became my shield. I contacted my lawyer the next morning, laying everything out. "She's breached the agreement," he said after reviewing the evidence. "You're protected, Alex. She won't get a dime more than what was outlined." It was a relief, but a hollow one. The betrayal wasn't about money. It was about trust, loyalty, and the life we had shared, or at least the life I thought we had. The night I confronted her was cold, a biting wind cutting through the trees outside our home. Kate was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in hand. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. Her brows knitted together. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning innocence. I sat down across from her, pulling the USB drive from my pocket. "I know about Marcus," I said simply. Her face froze, the color draining. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice wavered. "Don't insult me, Kate," I snapped. "I've seen the videos. The hotels, the cars, everything. I know about the money you've been giving him. Don't play dumb. It's over." Her defenses crumbled. Tears filled her eyes as she tried to explain, to justify. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she began, her voice shaking. "I was lonely, Alex. You were so distant, so consumed with work." "Don't," I cut her off, my anger boiling over. "Don't you dare blame me for this. You made your choices, Kate. You threw away our marriage, our life, for what? Some thrill? A scam artist who's been using you?" She broke down, sobbing into her hands. But I couldn't muster sympathy. Her tears felt like a performance, another manipulation. The divorce proceedings began swiftly. My lawyer, armed with the prenuptial agreement and the mountain of evidence, ensured that Kate's demands were kept in check. She tried to fight back, of course, claiming emotional neglect, painting herself as a victim. But the evidence was overwhelming. The court sided with me. Kate left with what the prenup allowed, nothing more, nothing less. The house, my assets, my company, all remained intact. Watching her walk away, defeated, was bittersweet. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to celebrate the justice served. But another part mourned the loss of the woman I had once loved, the life we had built. The fallout from the affair extended beyond just us. Our social circles buzzed with gossip, friends taking sides, some drifting away altogether. Marcus, predictably, vanished. Kate's so-called friends, the ones who had encouraged her fantasies, distanced themselves as well. She was left isolated, her once glamorous life reduced to a shadow of what it had been. As for me, I focused on healing. My friends, particularly Mark, rallied around me. "You're better off," he said one evening as we shared a drink. "She was toxic, Alex. You deserve better." I wanted to believe him, and slowly I began to. The scars Kate left were deep, but they were also a reminder of the importance of integrity, both in myself and in those I let into my life. In the end, the videos, the evidence, the legal battles, they weren't just tools to protect my assets. They were a mirror, forcing me to confront the reality of my marriage and the person I had become. Kate's betrayal wasn't just her failure, it was a symptom of something deeper, something broken in both of us. Now, as I stand in the house that once echoed with our laughter, I feel a strange sense of peace. The wounds are still there, but so is the strength to move forward. And for the first time in years, I feel free. Kate's life unraveled faster than I anticipated after the divorce. Watching it happen from a distance stirred complicated emotions in me, a mix of vindication, pity, and disbelief. The woman who once reveled in diamonds, elite clubs, and private chauffeurs now stood behind the hostess stand at a downtown restaurant, wearing a forced smile as she greeted customers. It was hard to imagine that this was the same Kate who had once hosted lavish soirees in our mansion's grand hall. After the court finalized our divorce, the terms of the prenuptial agreement kicked in like a guillotine. The house, cars, and all but a modest allowance remained mine. She walked away with only a fraction of what she'd grown accustomed to. That day, as she packed her belongings, I watched her carefully wrap a few sentimental items in tissue paper. Most of her luxury handbags and designer shoes stayed behind. It was sobering to see her grapple with the weight of her choices. "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly, standing in the doorway with her last suitcase. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Kate moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. I learned about her new life through whispers in our old social circles. Her so-called friends, the ones who had once egged her on, abandoned her the moment she lost her status. The glittering invitations stopped coming. The glamorous Instagram posts gave way to quiet updates, sunsets from her balcony, books she claimed to read. It was a facade, a weak attempt to pretend she didn't miss the life she'd thrown away. Financially, she was struggling. Marcus had long since disappeared, leaving her with drained accounts and debts she hadn't anticipated. To make ends meet, she took a job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant. I heard about it from Mark, who'd gone there for dinner one night. She looked different, he said, hesitating as he described her. Tired. Like someone who hadn't slept in days. She didn't recognize me at first. I could picture her there, wearing a cheap knockoff of the designer dresses she once owned, pretending to belong in a world she no longer had access to. The rumors got darker as time went on. Kate wasn't just struggling to pay rent, she was resorting to questionable means to survive. She had started offering private consultations to men who frequented the restaurant, selling them the charm she used to wield so effortlessly. I didn't want to believe it, but the reports were consistent. She was trading on the last thing she had left, her looks and her ability to enchant. Once, I ran into her by chance. It was late, and I was leaving a meeting downtown when I saw her crossing the street. She didn't notice me at first, but something about her posture, shoulders hunched, steps hurried, caught my attention. She looked thinner, her hair dull, her face drawn. It wasn't the Kate I remembered. "Kate," I called out instinctively. She froze, then turned slowly, her eyes widening in recognition. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of our shared history. "What are you doing here?" she asked finally, her voice cautious, almost defensive. "Just leaving a meeting," I said. "Ooh?" She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "Heading home." It was a lie, obvious in the way she shifted her weight and clutched her bag tightly. I didn't press her. As much as I wanted to ask, to know, I couldn't bring myself to reopen old wounds. "Look different," I said, unsure of what else to say. "So do you," she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. But it didn't reach her eyes. We parted ways without exchanging numbers or promises to keep in touch. It was clear that our lives had diverged completely. A few months later, I heard she'd been let go from the restaurant. The manager, a friend of a friend, confided that her side hustles had caught up with her. Clients, if that's what they were, had started showing up, causing scenes. The restaurant couldn't afford the bad press, so they let her go. Without a steady income, Kate's life spiraled further. She moved to an even smaller apartment in a less desirable part of town. The jewelry she had managed to keep disappeared piece by piece, sold to cover her expenses. The vibrant, confident woman I had once married was now a ghost, her pride shattered along with her illusions of grandeur. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to feel triumphant. Watching her fall so far from the pedestal she had built for herself was painful in a way I hadn't expected. I remembered the early days of our marriage, before the deceit and the scandals. There had been genuine moments of joy, of connection. The woman she had become was unrecognizable, but the memories of who she once was lingered. Mark tried to reassure me. "She made her choices, Alex. This isn't on you." I nodded, but his words felt hollow. It wasn't about blame, it was about the sadness of watching someone self-destruct. Kate's decline served as a cautionary tale in our social circles. People whispered about her downfall at parties, their voices tinged with both judgment and morbid fascination. Some pitied her, others relished her humiliation. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my work and rebuilding the life she had nearly destroyed. In the quiet moments, though, I found myself wondering what might have been. If things had been different, if she had been honest, if I had seen the cracks earlier, would we have ended up here? It was a question without an answer, a shadow that lingered even as I moved forward. In the end, Kate faded from my life entirely. The last I heard, she had taken another job, this time in retail, far from the luxury she once knew. Her name stopped coming up in conversations, her presence reduced to a distant memory. As for me, I found a strange peace in her absence. The house, once filled with the chaos of our marriage, became a sanctuary. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was liberating. I poured myself into my work, my friendships, and eventually, new beginnings. Kate's story wasn't mine to tell anymore. But its lessons were clear. Ambition without integrity is a fragile thing, destined to crumble. And when it does, the fall is long, and the landing is brutal. Life after Kate was a journey through uncharted territory, but eventually, I found myself on solid ground again. The scars she left were real, but they no longer defined me. What surprised me most was how quickly peace began to replace chaos once she was gone. The house, once a battlefield of silent dinners and simmering resentment, became my haven. It was ironic, in a way. I had designed the house as a monument to our shared life, and now it stood as a reminder of the life I was rebuilding alone. Then Ellie walked in. We met at a gallery opening for a client of mine. I wasn't there for the art as much as the networking, but Ellie stood out. She had an easy, unpretentious grace about her, a sharp contrast to the polished but hollow smiles I had grown used to in my previous life. She was an interior designer, her work vibrant and creative, reflecting a personality that didn't need validation from expensive labels or elite circles. We struck up a conversation over a modernist piece that neither of us understood but both pretended to admire. Her laugh was genuine, the kind that lit up a room, and I found myself drawn in. We talked about art, architecture, and life, and when the evening ended, I hesitated for the first time in years. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" I asked, feeling strangely nervous. She smiled. "I'd love to." Ellie and I fell into an easy rhythm. She wasn't impressed by my success in the way Kate had been. In fact, it hardly came up. She cared more about the stories behind my work than the price tags attached to it. Our dates were simple: walks through the park, cozy dinners at small bistros, and long conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. She had her own scars, though she rarely talked about them. When she did, it wasn't with bitterness but with a quiet strength that only deepened my admiration for her. Ellie had built her life on resilience, and that strength became a cornerstone of our relationship. Introducing her to my friends was the true litmus test. Mark, ever the skeptic, had been wary of anyone new in my life after Kate. But Ellie won him over within minutes. "She's nothing like Kate," he said later, approvingly. "You've done good, Alex." It wasn't just Mark. Everyone who met Ellie seemed to gravitate toward her warmth and sincerity. She didn't try to impress them, and that was exactly what impressed them. My friends stopped walking on eggshells around me, sensing that I was finally moving forward. Ellie and I worked on a project together, my house. It was her idea, a way to make it feel more like a home and less like a museum of past mistakes. She suggested changes that were subtle yet transformative: softer colors, cozier furniture, and spaces designed for living, not just entertaining. Watching her work was mesmerizing. She had a way of bringing out the best in every space, just as she seemed to bring out the best in me. One day, as we were finishing the living room, she turned to me and said, "You've built a beautiful life, Alex. You just needed to see it." Her words stayed with me. Our relationship deepened, and before long, we were talking about a future together. Marriage felt like a natural step, not a grand production but a quiet celebration of what we had built. We exchanged vows in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. There were no glittering chandeliers or orchestras, just the warmth of genuine connection. Ellie and I wanted a family, and a year after our wedding, we welcomed our daughter, Ava. Holding her for the first time was a moment I'll never forget. She had Ellie's eyes and my stubborn chin, and in that instant, I felt a joy I hadn't thought possible. Ellie and I poured our love into raising her, creating the kind of home I had once dreamed of but never quite achieved. Kate's shadow still lingered, though. I occasionally heard about her through mutual acquaintances. She had moved to a smaller town, where she was scraping by on odd jobs and the kindness of strangers. The luxurious lifestyle she had once flaunted was a distant memory, replaced by thrift stores and cramped apartments. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, there was only sadness. Kate's life was a cautionary tale, one I hoped Ava would never have to learn firsthand. I often wondered if she thought about the choices that led her there, about the life we might have had if things had been different. But those were questions I would never ask, and answers I would never need. Ellie and I built a life that felt real in a way my past never had. We traveled, laughed, and filled our home with memories. Ava grew into a bright, curious child who brought out the best in both of us. The house was no longer a monument to failure but a testament to resilience, love, and the possibility of starting over. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Ava play in the yard, Ellie turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about her?" I knew who she meant. Sometimes, I admitted. Not out of anger or regret, but she was a part of my life. A lesson I needed to learn. Ellie nodded, her hand finding mine. "You've come a long way, Alex." "We both have." She was right. The past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. Ellie and Ava were my present, my future. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Kate, wherever she was, had her own path to walk. I wished her no harm, but neither did I wish her back into my life. My story had moved on, and so had I. As I watched Ava chase fireflies in the fading light, Ellie leaning against my shoulder, I realized something. Life wasn't about avoiding pain or mistakes. It was about what you did with the lessons they left behind. And for that, I was grateful.